Hello everybody, I'm going to go over this sheet here and hopefully this will kind of make a lot more sense after we talk about it. So the first one, it says my axis of symmetry is x equals -2. I want you to remember when you see this equation that has no y, that means it does not touch the y-axis, but it does touch the x-axis at 2. So the axis of symmetry right here, it goes through the center of that parabola. That one's going to be x equals 3. This one's going to be x equals 1. This one is x equals 0. This one here looks like x equals 4. It's my axis of symmetry. This one looks like it's also x equals 4. This one looks like it's x equals -1. This one finally has an axis of symmetry that is x equals 2. So I'm talking about this line right here. I could fold on top of that line and that parabola would match up on both sides. It goes through the lowest or the highest point of the parabola. In this case, this parabola has a minimum, so it goes through that lowest point. So I'm going to say G is an answer for that one, and I'm going to keep checking the rest. This axis of symmetry looks like 1 to -4, x equals -4, and this axis of symmetry is also x equals 2. So there are two graphs that have an axis of symmetry of x equals 2. Okay, in the equation, the a value is greater than 0. So what that means, if the a value, we're talking about that number that changes how wide or how skinny the parabola is, or what flips it upside down. So if the a value is greater than 0, that means it's positive. That means it's going to open up. So it's going to look like a U. It is not going to look like an upside down U. This graph has an a value of negative something. This a value is positive. So B is the first one that I'm going to put there. Because this opens up, it looks like a U. That also has a positive a value. D, we say it opens down or it was reflected across the x-axis, so that's going to have a negative a value. This one, letter E, has a positive a value because it opens up. F is going to have a negative a value. G is going to have a positive a value. H is going to have a positive a value, and I is going to have a negative a value. So my correct answers there would be B, C, E, G, H, because they are all the graphs that have a U shape. Okay, the next one says I have no zeros. That means no zero of the function. Another way of saying that is no x-intercept. So the ones that have no x-intercept, see how this parabola touches the x-axis twice? That would have 2 x-intercepts or 2 zeros. This one would also have 2 x-intercepts. This one does not touch the x-axis, so we say that it has no zeros of the function, it has no x-intercepts, it has no roots. That all means the same thing. When I go to D, it touches the x-axis once. And this one does not touch the x-axis, so I say that E also has no 0. F touches the x-axis twice. G touches the x-axis twice. H touches the x-axis twice. And I touches the x-axis twice. So most of the time, you're going to get 2 solutions, 2 spots where the parabola touches the x-axis, but of course there's those special cases where they would just touch once or where they would not touch at all. So the 2 that do not touch at all are C and E. Okay, the next one here says my range is y is less than or equal to 0. So when we talk about a range, we're saying, domain is all the possible x's. So we're saying, left and right. Range is all your possible y's, so up and down. So if your range, if the y is less than or equal to 0, that means everything would be basically below the x-axis, because a y value of 0 is, you know, right here on the x-axis. So is this entire parabola below the x-axis? No. Is this entire parabola below the x-axis? No. Is this entire parabola below the x-axis? No. D, it's because it says the range is less than or equal to 0, D does work because the highest point here, we call this the maximum. Every vertex has either a maximum or a minimum. This one has a maximum, you know, this one has a minimum, this one has a maximum, this one has a minimum, this is a minimum, this is a maximum, and you know, the maximum means that's the highest that it will ever be. So the highest y value that you will ever get from this quadratic function is y equals 0. So that means D does work here. This one is definitely out. Again, I'm looking for the parabolas that everything is at or below the x-axis. That means the range, the y value would be less than or equal to 0. So we only had one answer there, which was D. Okay. This next one here says my zeros are at x equals -2 and x equals 4. And again, the zeros of the function is talking about the x-intercepts. So we're only going to be looking at parabolas that touch the x-axis twice. And the two spots that it touches, we're looking for a -2 and a +4. So right here, they're both positive numbers where they touch. That looks pretty close to a +1 and a +5. So that's not it. This touches at -2 and +4. So B is a correct answer here. Another one, this does not touch the x-axis. This only touches once. This does not touch at all. This touches twice. So the two places that it touches, it looks like it's a little bit messy there, but 1, 2, 3, looks like it's a little bit more than -4 and a little bit more than +2. This one touches the x-axis at 0 and at +4. This one touches the x-axis at something close to -1.5 and I think that's like -6.5, you know, something like that. I'm just kind of estimating. And this one does touch the x-axis twice. It looks like maybe 1/2 and, you know, 3.5. And of course, I'm just estimating there. So there is only one answer for this one. The zeros are at x is -2 and x is 4. Okay, the next one here says my maximum value is y equals 4. So the maximum, we're only looking at these parabolas that have kind of been flipped upside down or reflected. And so what is this maximum value? And you got to come over here and look like how high did it actually get? The y value there is 1. It never goes higher than +1. It goes lower than that and it keeps on going and going and going. So the range here is that the y value is less than or equal to +1, which is not what we're looking for right now. This next one here, this one has a minimum value, and that minimum value would be 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, -5. This one has a minimum value of +1. This one has a maximum value, and the maximum value there would be y equals 0. This has a minimum value, and the minimum value here is y equals 1. This one has a maximum value, and the maximum value there is 1, 2, 3, 4. So y equals 4. We just found an answer here. F is our first answer because the highest that this parabola will ever get is 4 for the y. Okay, it can never be higher than y equals 4. This one has a minimum value, so that one's out. This has a minimum, this has a maximum, and that maximum value is 3. So the highest that parabola ever gets there is +3. So there's only one correct answer for this one. Okay, the next one says I have a minimum value. So every one that has a minimum value is going to be one that opens up. So when it opens up, there is a minimum. So that would be B and C and E and G and H. They all have a U shape. So that means they all have a minimum. Okay, next one says my range is y is greater than or equal to -3. So if you find your -3 on the Y-axis is the entire parabola above that. So like, here's my -3. Is the entire parabola above that? No. Here is my -3. Is the entire parabola above that? No, we have this part that's below it. Y is greater than or equal to -3. So everything is above that, but being more specific, this range would be Y is greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so this range, Y is greater than or equal to 1. It just means that every single part of that parabola, every part of that quadratic function is above Y equals, or it's above or equal to Y equals +1. This one's not going to apply since it opens down, because if it's Y is greater than, it has to, open up. This one would be, the range is Y is greater than or equal to +1. This one, the range Y would be less than, since there's a maximum, it's going to be less than or equal to, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Y equals 4. Okay, this one, the lowest that this ever gets, that looks like it is -4. So this was close. This range is Y is greater than or equal to -4. Now I think here we found the right answer. So the lowest that this parabola ever gets is 3 spots below the x-axis there. So this right here, letter H, has a range that is Y is greater than or equal to -3. And if I want to talk about that range, it would be less than, Y is less than or equal to +3. Okay, and the last one says my domain is all real numbers. Now, a domain is all your possible x's. So on A, what could all my possible x's be? So if my x is 0, can I get to the parabola? Yes. If my x is -1, can I get to my parabola? Yes. What if my x is -2? If I keep going, notice there's an arrow there. This parabola is going to keep going. So -2 works. How about, -10? Well, if I would go way down, that would still be on there. And same thing with the positive direction. Every single time you're dealing with a quadratic function that has no context, the domain will always be all real numbers. The only time that does not apply is once we introduce context, where we're, talking about a specific, situation where it's limited because of, time or, something like that. So that means that every single one of these parabolas has a domain that is all real numbers. So that means A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. Every single one has a domain of all real numbers. And that's it.